Elon Musk is shocked to reunite with his Negro ex after 20 years y mete MILLIONAIRE move. It was a night buzzing with the glimmer of wealth and secrets. The kind of night where anything could explode behind shiny champagne glasses and polite smiles. David Carter, the tech titan everyone in Silicon Valley watched like a superstar, wasn't ready for what was coming. The charity gala, all velvet and sparkling lights, was supposed to be business as usual. Instead, it turned into a stage for a shocking reunion that shattered his polished world like a mirror dropped on cold, hard marble. Maya Johnson, the woman who had gotten under David's skin 2 decades ago and left him raw, was standing there as fierce and radiant as ever. She was no stranger to headlines herself now, a powerful activist known for clawing at the roots of social injustice, especially the kind David's company had accidentally fed. The jazz music seemed to freeze. The crowd whispered, eyes darting between the glam. The same tech she accused of choking the poorest neighborhoods, reinforcing barriers of race and class that he had never wanted to think about. Whispers floated. Isn't that Maya Johnson and David Carter after all this time? A faint ripple of shock spread, like a secret spilled at a wedding. Cameras flickered discreetly, phones lowered cautiously. The tension was thick enough to cut. Maya's eyes locked on David's, sharp and challenging. No trace of the girl he'd loved, only the warrior she'd become. David's world exploded. The memories hit like a tidal wave. The fights, the dreams they shared and broke, the words left unsaid. Now the old wounds yawned open, pain biting sharper than any boardroom battle or startup pitch. Maya spoke, slow and steady, revealing her latest campaign, a brutal spotlight on one of David's innovations that was crushing marginalized communities under the weight of progress masked as innovation. His mind raced. How could success taste so bitter? His empire, his pride, clashed violently with this woman's call for justice, for truth, for change. Could he face what was beneath the gleam of his achievements? Could he admit what his bubble couldn't hold? The gala's elegant murmur faded behind the pounding in his ears. And then the shock dropped like a bomb. A connection, a hidden thread tying his company's deepest secrets to Maya's struggle. A revelation that could burn everything down or build a bridge neither saw coming. David's breath caught. His hands clenched into fists. Would he stand and fight for his legacy? Or break everything to set things right? The night waited, holding its breath, and so did David. But what price would he pay? And would Maya even trust him anymore? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube removed their subscriptions without notice. Take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any exclusive content that's coming. And since you're here, drop a powerful like. That really helps me with the algorithm. Oh, and let me know in the comments, what city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. David's breath caught. His hands clenched into fists. Would he stand and fight for his legacy, or break everything to set things right? The night waited, holding its breath, and so did David. Then the ground shook beneath them. A sudden roar of chaos erupted. An explosion of glass and metal splintered through the air. The jazz music froze, replaced by screams and panic. People stumbled backward, clutching each other in shock. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the faces in the room. "What the hell was that?" David shouted, the fear rising in his chest like bile. He turned, searching for Maya, but she was already moving, her instincts sharper than ever, every step electrified with purpose. "We need to get out of here." But Maya froze. Her eyes widened as she stared toward the entrance. David followed her gaze. A group of masked figures stormed in, armed and wild, shattering the calm of the gala in an instant. The glittering chandeliers cast glints on their weapons. Gasps filled the room. Panic erupted like a firework. Guests scattered. Chairs crashed to the floor, and shouts mingled with the outside sirens, starting to wail. David's stomach twisted. This wasn't just an attack. It was a targeted assault. For a moment, chaos hung like fog, dense and suffocating. He caught Maya's arm as she began to move, but felt something cold in her gaze, something he didn't recognize. "We have to go," he urged, heart racing. Then a voice rang out, deep and commanding. "Everyone down! This is a raid!" The masked figures swept through the room, gunfire followed by a tense silence. People dropped to the floor, their faces pale, eyes wide with terror. The beautiful night had turned into a dark nightmare. David felt Maya's hand slip from his grip. She charged forward, shouting at the crowd, urging them to escape. "Listen! Follow me! There's a back exit!" Her voice pierced through the chaos like a beacon, but as she reached the edge of the crowd, a loud crash echoed. One of the masked figures had burst through a barrier, and suddenly, everything fell to pieces. "Maya, no!" David lunged, desperate to pull her back, but she was already moving, cutting through the confusion. Her strength took him by surprise. She was fierce and determined. But then, amidst the chaos, he spotted something that froze him in place. A small flash of recognition. One of the figures, their stance, the way they held the gun. David gasped, heart pounding. "Maya!" he yelled, his voice cracking. It's someone from your past!" The figure turned just long enough for Maya to catch a glimpse, the mask slipping to reveal familiar eyes, burning with fury and hurt. "You abandoned us," the figure screamed, anger erupting. "What you built destroyed lives." The similarity was striking. David felt the air leave his lungs. Shock and disbelief mingled in his mind. This was personal. The tension clawed at him, a raw mix of fear, regret, and realization. Could this be someone linked to Maya's fight? A reminder that he had unknowingly walked away from? David's heart thundered. The streets, the struggles, the people, they were all connected. All those years spent building his empire, while Maya had fought to bring justice. Suddenly, a sickening truth bubbled up inside him. Their stories were intertwined in a way he could never have anticipated. Choices he had made had consequences darker than he understood. And as the masked assailants advanced, the future hung precariously in the balance. The night raged on, filled with cries and the heart-wrenching weight of decisions unmade. What would David do now? Would he fight back? Or find a way to unite with Maya against the very shadows they had both run from? The crowd moved like a wave, but David stood rooted, caught in the grip of what was unfolding. In that moment, everything changed. David's breath caught, his hands clenched into fists. Would he stand and fight for his legacy, or break everything to set things right? The night waited, holding its breath, and so did David. Then, without warning, the lights flickered violently. A sharp gasp rippled through the crowd. The jazz music faltered, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. David glanced around, confusion clouding his mind. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the hall, like a thunderclap, followed by gasps and startled cries. A woman screamed. David whipped his head back to Maya. Her face had drained of color. He followed her gaze, and horror enveloped him. Across the room, a figure emerged from the shadows, holding something glittering ominously, a gun. The atmosphere thickened with panic. Guests stumbled back in disbelief, faces twisted in fear. "Security!" someone shouted, but David could only stare as the gunman advanced, eyes locked onto Maya. Time slowed. Every heartbeat felt like an eternity. Maya stepped forward, fierce, unyielding. "No, don't!" she shouted, her voice breaking like glass. She faced the threat as if her power could quell the chaos. "Stay back!" the gunman barked, wild-eyed and desperate. "This is about justice! You've all been blind to the truth!" Shock turned into terror. David's thoughts raced. Who was this? Why was he here? He lunged toward Maya, but the crowd held him back. The gunmen seemed to feed off their fear. "You think you can hide from what you've done, the lives you've ruined?" Gasps exploded throughout the hall. Whispers flickered like flames. What does he mean? The air vibrated with dread. David's heart thumped hard. He could almost taste the panic, the weight of choices he hadn't even begun to consider. It hit him like a punch. The very innovations Maya accused him of harming, those late-night brainstorms, all those lofty dreams had led to this moment. Maya stepped closer to the gunman, hands up, trying to reach him, trying to make sense of this madness. "Let's talk! You don't have to do this!" But in that heartbeat, everything exploded. Another loud bang. A flash of chaos. The gunshot rang out as the crowd screamed. Shattered glass fell, and a shadow fell over everything. David's mind pinned down on one brutal realization. The gunman hadn't shot Maya, but whoever had been next to her, a blurred figure, now crumpling to the floor. The room plunged into chaos, bodies rushing, people stumbling. All David could do was stand frozen, watching horror unfold, his skin prickling with dread. Maya screamed again, but it wasn't a scream of bravery now. It was raw and chilling. "No!" Suddenly, the gunman dropped the weapon, eyes wide, his anger morphing into a kind of despair. What was happening? David fought through the panicked crowd, adrenaline rushing. He reached Maya, who was kneeling beside the fallen figure. The gunman, now a broken man. "What do I do?" she pleaded, her voice raw, trembling with desperation. The figure lay still, a glimmer of fabric catching the light, a reflection of the past, a connection David couldn't yet understand. And just as David opened his mouth to speak, a revelation shattered his very spirit. No, it couldn't be. Was this person connected to him? Was this what had happened beneath the surface, festering for years? The truth clawed its way up his throat. How deeply intertwined were their fates? As sirens wailed in the distance, David's world crumbled again. What had he overlooked? What was the real cost of his empire? And more importantly, how could he ever face Maya again? David's heart raced, pounding against his chest like a frantic drum. The chaos wrapped around him in a suffocating grip as he knelt beside Maya, her eyes wide with terror. The fallen figure, the familiar face, marked a painful intersection of their past and present. "No, please!" she cried, hovering over them, the realization draining the color from her face. But just then, another shout sliced through the air. "We need medics! Now!" A voice rose above the pandemonium, echoing the frantic fear swelling in the room. People cried out, and David glanced at the masked gunman. He staggered back, the weapon slipping from his fingers as disbelief washed over him. As he fell to his knees, the mask slipped further, revealing not just eyes, but a face David recognized. Someone he had seen at community meetings. Someone whose pleas for help echoed in the corridors of his mind. This was not just a stranger. This was a face woven into the very tapestry of his conscience. But then, the ground shook violently again. A deafening roar filled the air. The doors burst open. More intruders, more chaos, more masks. Paralyzed, David and Maya watched as everything shifted into overdrive. The glimmering lights overhead swayed as if on the brink of collapse, casting chaotic shadows everywhere. The second group pushed in, brandishing weapons and shouting commands. The atmosphere crackled with renewed terror. "Maya, get down!" David grabbed her, ready to shield her, but something pulled him back. A flash out of the corner of his eye, another figure darting towards them. This one was smaller, nimble. Just as his heart sank deeper, the figure ripped off their mask, revealing a familiar face that knocked the air from David's lungs. "Jasmine?" he whispered, shock freezing him in place. His younger sister. Their estranged connection felt like a stone sinking into his gut. She hadn't been around in years. The weight of her eyes held years of unspoken grievances, hurt, and confusion. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here to make things right," she shouted, fraught with emotion. "You've got no idea how deep this goes, David. You think this is a game? You ignored us. You turned your back." Maya turned, confusion evident. "David, is she your sister?" David didn't answer. He was trapped in a whirlwind of sight and sound. The masked gunman advanced, commanding, demanding silence. The energy surged, fraying threads of connection with each pulse. Jasmine pushed forward, urgency igniting her every movement. "This was never about you," she yelled at the gunman, unafraid. "You don't understand the pain you're causing. None of this had to happen." The lead gunman recoiled slightly, surprise flickering across his face as he took in Jasmine. But his expression hardened. "You think you can just walk in here and demand justice? You know nothing." Then Jasmine reached into her pocket, pulling out a small device. David's heart dropped. It wasn't just a phone. It was evidence of everything. "I have proof," she announced, the tremor in her voice betraying her fierce determination. "Proof that connects all of you, your company, everything you built. to the injustice Maya fights against. David's breath caught again. The pieces were crashing down, blending into a terrifying picture. The fragile line that separated his loyalty from the truth blurred with each revelation. The stakes had just been raised. Would his sister jeopardize everything he'd fought for? As fear and adrenaline collided, the sound of sirens wailed in the distance, inching closer. In that moment, the reality shifted like sand underfoot. Trust was crumbling, and old ties now felt like chains. Would this challenge unite them or further unravel everything? Maya's eyes locked with David's, questioning, searching. What's really at stake here? The room pulsed with tension. Fear layered with a flicker of hope. David's mind spiraled. He had built walls, crafted a life, but at what cost? Jasmine's voice broke through the fog, tearing at his carefully constructed facade. David, it's time to choose. The realization dawned, heavy and immediate. This wasn't just a night gone wrong. This was a reckoning. And as the world hung precariously in balance, an unthinkable truth lingered in the shadows of their past, threatening to expose the truth they'd all fled from for far too long. What would he choose? How would this night transform them all? David's breath caught, his hands clenched into fists. Would he stand and fight for his legacy, or break everything to set things right? The night waited, holding its breath, still. And so did David. But suddenly, a loud crack shattered the tense air. It was the unmistakable sound of glass shattering on the floor. All heads jerked toward the entrance. An unknown figure burst in, silhouetted against the bright lights of the gala. The atmosphere shifted, thick and heavy with confusion. David, the voice rang out, sharp and piercing, drawing all eyes back to the newcomer. It was Marcus, David's estranged brother. He was disheveled, as if he'd stormed straight from a battle. Sweat dripped down his forehead, and his eyes were wild, darting around the room. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, electric with speculation. You need to hear this. We don't have much time. David's heart raced. He hadn't seen Marcus in years. Not since their family fell apart over bitter arguments about the very company David built. Memories of shouting matches, accusations, and blame flooded back, sizzling with unresolved tension. What are you doing here, Marcus? David managed through gritted teeth, fury mixing with fear. Maya's gaze flickered between the brothers, confusion etched on her face. Just listen. Marcus pressed, his voice trembling. It's about the tech you're pushing, the data. It's not just numbers, it's people's lives. They've been hiding something huge. Your company, it's linked to something dark. Gasps echoed through the crowd. David's stomach nodded. What the hell are you talking about? Your algorithms, Marcus continued, stepping closer, sweat soaking his shirt. They're not just about efficiency. They're designed to push out the very communities Maya fights for. People's homes are vanishing because of what you're doing. It's worse than you can even imagine. The world around David blurred. He caught Maya's eyes, wide and wild, filled with a fear he hadn't seen before. The jazz music faded into a haunting silence, and all eyes were on him now. The once untouchable titan of Silicon Valley, suddenly exposed and vulnerable under the spotlight. Stop! "That's not true!" David exclaimed. But doubt crept in. What did he really know? "Look at the news!" Marcus shouted, desperation clawing at his voice. "It's all there! Those marginalized neighborhoods, people are being targeted! You've got to do something before it's too late!" The words struck like a thunderclap. David's world spun. His empire felt like quicksand, shifting underfoot, threatening to swallow him whole. Maya stepped forward. "David, is this true?" Here was the shocking twist. Had his legacy been built on the ruins of others? The very technology he championed, the innovations he prided himself on, were they instruments of decay instead of progress? David faltered, his mind racing, but the truth clawed at him. The bridge he thought he built for connection seemed to morph into a chasm of destruction. The crowd remained hushed, watching, waiting, hanging on every uncertain word. Without warning, a murmur surged through the crowd. What will he do? Can he fix this? All eyes locked onto David, a titan rattled, a man caught between pride and awakening. But would he rise to the challenge, or would he crumble beneath the weight of his revelations? The night throbbed with uncertainty, and as the reality set in, it dawned on him. This wasn't just about Maya's fight anymore. This was about his own. The stakes had never been higher, and the walls were closing in. Could he still save his legacy? Or was it already too late? David stood still, caught in Maya's fierce gaze, his thoughts racing. Should he dare to challenge the weight of the past? But just as he opened his mouth, a deafening crash echoed across the gala hall, slicing through the tension like a knife. The chandeliers shook, their crystals trembling, as a heavy spotlight swung wildly from the ceiling. Screams erupted from the crowd. People scrambled, dropping drinks, their faces awash with terror. In that instant, everything shifted, from the elegant affair to pure chaos. "Get down!" a voice shouted. David instinctively pulled Maya close, shielding her from the falling debris. The crowd surged toward the exits, alive with panic, and yet, in that moment, he felt her pulse against his, steady yet frantic. Where had the fight gone from their conversation? Tossed aside in a storm of confusion. Amid the chaos, a shadowy figure emerged from the haze, darting towards them. Both of them squinted, their hearts pounding louder than the unfolding disaster. Maya's eyes widened. "It can't be!" she whispered. David turned just as the figure broke free from the crowd, the chaos parting like the Red Sea. It was a man in a dark suit. Not just any man. Lucas, Maya's brother. The one David thought had vanished years ago in a political scandal that had rocked their lives. "What are you doing here?" Maya yelled, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. Lucas's face was drawn, eyes wild. "You have to listen to me. It's not what you think. They're coming for you all." He took a step closer, his expression melding fear with urgency. As the rest of the gala disintegrated around them, people struggling to evacuate, security rushing in, David felt the world slow down. "What do you mean?" he asked, suddenly aware that this night held deeper layers than mere business and old flames. Maya, still close, grabbed David's arm. "You know him? I thought he was." But David couldn't finish. What was Lucas doing here, and why was he suddenly the bearer of shadows? "No time. We're at the center of something huge. It'll blow the lid off everything. Your company, it's all tied in. Lucas's urgency turned the air thick. Maya's grip tightened on David. Fear flashed in sus ojos, but there was something else through. An ember of hope mingled with desperation. She didn't want to believe this. She wanted to dismiss him. But the gallery was drowning in chaos, and the urgency of Lucas's words hung heavy. Suddenly, an explosion burst outside, a fireball lighting the night sky, casting dark shadows across their faces. They all turned to look. The crowd gasped, and disarray filled the air. "They're here!" Lucas hissed, backing away, as if he could sense unseen dangers closing in. David's mind whirled. This wasn't just about his business or his relationship with Maya anymore. It was about survival, hidden truths clawing their way to the surface. "Trust me," Lucas pleaded. "We need to get out now. They've set us up." David felt the swell in his chest. Could he really trust the ghost from the past? And what role did Maya play in this? The ground beneath his feet felt uncertain. All the unspoken sentiments, those haunting memories, bubbled up inside him, twisted in confusion. The night was morphing into something far grander and darker than he ever imagined. Maya turned to David, determination cracking through her shock. "We have to decide. Are we going to fight back or run?" In the heart of the collapsing gala, with rogues and mysteries lurking, David faced a choice that would alter everything. Would he pull closer to Maya and forge a new path together, or let the weight of his past drown him in chaos? The shadows thickened, and the choice loomed, echoing in his heart. What would he risk to face the truth? And could the threads connecting them withstand the impending storm? The night held its breath, ready to spin their destinies in unexpected directions. David's breath caught. His hands clenched into fists. Would he stand and fight for his legacy, or break everything to set things right? The night waited, holding its breath, and so did David. Then, without warning, everything changed. A sharp crack sliced through the air, a shatter that made heads turn, eyes widen. The glass chandelier overhead trembled, sending tiny prisms of light scattering like startled stars. The music stopped, laughter choked. What they didn't see at first was Maya, her face turning pale, her body rigid as a storm crossed her features. "David!" Her voice was a whisper, broken and urgent. He followed her gaze, heart racing. At the back of the room, a man stepped forward. Tall, with dark hair and a sharp suit that looked like it came with its own secrets. He held a device, glinting ominously, a gadget that pulsed with a blue light, a beacon of tension in the crowd. Eyes darted, whispers bounced off the walls like startled birds. "Is that a bomb?" someone gasped. The air thickened and panic prickled the atmosphere. David could see it in their eyes, fear, disbelief. He turned back to Maya, but she was looking past him, her expression shifting from concern to something deeper, something like recognition, then horror. "Maya, who is that?" he asked, but she couldn't take her eyes off him. "My brother," she breathed, as if the words were a physical blow. "There's no time." David's world tilted. A brother? The man stalking toward them wasn't just some terrorist. He was family, a part of Maya's hidden past that she had never shared. David's mind raced. What had he walked into? What secrets had Maya hidden? Had she known this was going to happen? The thoughts bombarded him like the lights flashing from the device in the man's hands. A cold sweat gripped his spine. "Everyone, stay calm!" he shouted, but his voice cracked. Eyes shifted, nervous energy thrumming through the crowd. He scanned for exits as the tension became a living thing, crawling along bare arms and shivering down spines. The man approached, his gaze laser-focused on Maya, a mix of anger and desperation mingling in his expression. "You turned your back on us," he yelled, voice booming through the stunned silence. The gala, the laughter, the elegance seemed like a cruel joke against this blazing confrontation. "Maya!" David reached out. "What's happening?" "David, I didn't know." "Save it," the man interrupted, raising the device higher. "This ends now." A hush fell, pierced only by Maya's trembling breath. "This can't be how it goes. You don't have to do this. Not here." Her voice was pleading, but the resolve was there. David felt his heart race. Every decision he had made, every compromise, flashed through his mind. Was he responsible for this? For the destruction that this man seemed poised to unleash? The agony in Maya's eyes was a punch to his gut. "And what about your legacy, David? Your so-called innovation has hurt us," the brother spat. "Tonight, we flip the script." In that moment, everything shifted. David realized the connection woven between their lives, beyond the business, beyond the pain. A tangled web spinning back to the past, a fracture that had never healed. Chaos threatened to erupt as the crowd surged, people screaming and pushing for the exits. The air buzzed with confusion and dread. David looked at Maya, her face pale, her eyes wide. What would happen next? The future hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of a knife. And in that charged moment, he understood the bittersweet truth. His decisions had driven them apart, and now they could either come together to face this nightmare or be torn further apart than he ever imagined. And so they stood there, hearts pounding, as the night spiraled into darkness, each breath filled with the weight of the unknown. Would they find each other amidst the chaos, or would everything they had known shatter like glass around them? David stood still, caught in Maya's fierce gaze, his thoughts racing. Should he dare to challenge the weight of the past? But just as he opened his mouth, a deafening crash echoed across. The music stopped, the laughter choked. What they didn't see at first was Maya, her face turning pale, her body rigid as a storm crossed her features. "David!" Her voice was a whisper, broken and urgent. He followed her gaze, heart racing. At the back of the room, a man stepped forward, tall, with dark hair and a sharp suit that looked like it came with its own secrets. He held a device, glinting ominously, a gadget that pulsed with a blue light, a beacon of tension in the crowd. Eyes darted, whispers bounced off the walls like startled birds. "Is that a bomb?" someone gasped. The air thickened, and panic prickled the atmosphere. David could see it in their eyes. Fear, disbelief. He turned back to Maya, but she was looking past him, her expression shifting from concern to something deeper. Something like recognition. Then horror. "Maya, who is that?" he asked. But she couldn't take her eyes off him. "My brother," she breathed, as if the words were a physical blow. There's no time. David's world tilted. A brother? The man stalking toward them wasn't just some terrorist. He was family. A part of Maya's hidden past that she had never shared. David's mind raced. What had he walked into? What secrets had Maya hidden? Had she known this was going to happen? The thoughts bombarded him like the lights flashing from the device in the man's hands. A cold sweat gripped his spine. "Everyone stay calm," he shouted, but his voice cracked. Eyes shifted, nervous energy thrumming through the crowd. He scanned for exits as the tension became a living thing, crawling along bare arms and shivering down spines. The man approached, his gaze laser-focused on Maya. A mix of anger and desperation mingling in his expression. "You turned your back on us!" he yelled, voice booming through the stunned silence. The gala, the laughter, the elegance seemed like a cruel joke against this blazing confrontation. "Maya," David reached out. "What's happening?" "David, I didn't know." "Save it," the man interrupted, raising the device higher. "This ends now." A hush fell, pierced only by Maya's trembling breath. "This can't be how it goes, not here." Her voice was pleading, but the resolve was there. David felt his heart race. Every decision he had made, every compromise flashed through his mind. Was he responsible for this? For the destruction that this man seemed poised to unleash? The agony in Maya's eyes was a punch to his gut. "And what about your legacy, David? Your so-called innovation has hurt us," the brother spat. "Tonight, we flipped the script." In that moment, everything shifted. David realized the connection woven between their lives, beyond the business, beyond the pain. A tangled web spinning back to the past, a fracture that had never healed. Chaos threatened to erupt as the crowd surged, people screaming and pushing for the exits. The air buzzed with confusion and dread. David looked at Maya, her face pale, her eyes wide. What would happen next? The future hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of a knife, and in that charged moment, he understood the bittersweet truth. His decisions had driven them apart, and now they could either come together to face this nightmare or be torn further apart than he ever imagined. And then, with a sudden flash, the device exploded. Not with a bang, but with a blinding light. Time slowed, the world splintering into shards of color. David couldn't see, couldn't breathe. Pain twisted through him, a scorching wave that ripped through the chaos. But in the throbbing silence that followed, a voice echoed through the haze. "David, I'm sorry." It was Maya's brother, crumpling to the floor as the crowd gasped in collective disbelief. One moment, he was standing defiantly. The next, he was falling away, disappearing into the shadows of what once was. Then, as if the lights dimmed for good, David realized everything had shifted, because in that moment of confusion, he saw it. Maya's face, frozen in both sorrow and fury. David, this was the plan. All of it. And suddenly, everything he thought he knew cracked and splintered, questions dancing in the wreckage. What had she done? What had they all been a part of? The night was alive with uncertainty, and no one was who they seemed. As the smoke of chaos began to settle, David stood in the remnants of trust, swallowed by a new fear. Had Maya been tied to something far darker than he ever imagined? What would he choose now? The night held its breath, and for the first time he felt utterly lost. David stood, heart racing as the scene crumbled around him. The chaos of the gala felt miles away. Yet here was Maya, trembling by his side, facing the brother she'd thought lost. The weight of revelations hanging heavy in the air. The device had just exploded with a blinding flash, and now the acrid smell of smoke mixed with the panic swirling in the crowd. In the silence that followed that explosion, time felt like it stretched infinitely. People were now frozen, mouths agape, eyes wide with shock. David's gaze shifted from the crumpled form of Maya's brother to Maya herself, whose face read horror and disbelief. The connection of family ripped open wounds that should have been left alone. But just then, before anyone could process the moment, something broke through the haze. A figure burst through the smoke, moving faster than anyone could react. With wild eyes, he shouted, "Get down!" Everyone ducked, and just like that, another explosion sounded, this one directly in front of them. The force, white noise filled his ears as he struggled to regain his balance. "Maya!" he called out, but the words were lost in the din. The crowd screamed and surged in all directions, like a storm made of panic. As David scrambled to his feet, he looked around wildly. The grand hall he'd known, filled with twinkling lights and laughter, had transformed into a war zone. Amidst the confusion, he spotted Maya. She was struggling against the crowd, eyes blazing with furious resolve. But there was a storm brewing inside her. "Maya!" he shouted, pushing toward her. But she didn't hear. She could see something he couldn't. A glint behind the scattered debris. Just as he reached her, she screamed, "Look out!" The figure that had emerged from the smoke lunged towards them. David's heart dropped when he recognized who it was. "Lucas!" he yelled. Only it wasn't just Lucas. Behind him was a whole group of masked figures, their intentions deadly clear. And in an instant, David's thoughts shattered. It wasn't just a random attack. It was personal. They'd targeted Maya. Her brother had orchestrated this chaos. The betrayal curled in his gut like poison. The phantoms of memories flickered in his mind. Every time they had fought for something, the struggles they shared. But now, as he kneeled by Maya, the realization twisted his thoughts. What kind of monster had her brother become? That betrayal held sharp edges. "I'll handle this," Maya shouted, her voice fierce as she pushed David aside, determination blazing as she confronted Lucas. "You don't have to do this. We can fix this together." David could feel the ground shifting beneath him. Suddenly, a deafening roar erupted right beside him, knocking him back into the chaos. Thick, black smoke billowed, and through the haze, something sharper caught his eye. His breath stopped. It wasn't just smoke. It was a message. A piece of paper spiraling through the air. David reached out, grabbing it as it landed. His heart raced as he unfurled it, the words burning into his mind. "You think you know truth? The company's ties run deeper. Follow the money, David. His world spiraled. The company he thought he'd built on dreams wasn't just successful, it was built on deception. And who had set this in motion? Did Maya know? Before he had time to process, chaos erupted again. Lucas, now with a weapon drawn, shouted, "This is your last chance, Maya! Stand with me, or face the consequences!" For the first time, David saw her falter. The divergence between loyalties shone bright as the truth loomed. Everyone was watching, waiting for a choice. And right then, as the foundations of their world trembled, David realized the night wasn't just about survival or loyalty. It was about awakening a beast they had long since thought dormant. Would they fight against the storm, or was this the moment everything shattered beyond repair? The night held its breath, but this time, so did David. The choice loomed ahead, each second heavier than the last. David was rooted in place, the air crackling with tension. His heart raced, hammering against his chest like an urgent call. Maya's eyes locked onto Lucas, filled with pain, anger, and an unyielding determination. The conflicting loyalties of family, love, and truth swirled around them like the debris from the last explosion. "Lucas, this isn't justice!" Maya shouted, her voice steady, even as fear danced in her eyes. "It's chaos. We can find a way to make it right." But Lucas's expression hardened. "You think talking will fix this? You can't see the destruction that's all around you. This," he gestured to the chaos, "is the only language they understand." David stepped forward, adrenaline surging. "What happened to you, Lucas? This isn't you. There are other ways to fight back." His voice echoed against the crumbling decor, rattling through the shadows. Suddenly, Lucas faltered. For a heartbeat, vulnerability flickered across his face. "You don't know what I've lost." The weight of his anguish hung heavy in the air. It was more than just anger. It was a fire stoked by injustice, tragedy, and a sense of betrayal. A moment passed. The crowd, once deafened by panic, held its breath, hanging on to every word like a lifeline. David took a chance. He stepped closer to the chaos-wrought family drama swirling before him. "We can help each other," he urged, feeling the weight of Maya's hopeful gaze behind him. Before they could continue, the sound of sirens blared outside, a grim reminder that time was running out. People still cowered in fear, eyes darting toward their escape routes, every heartbeat a reminder of their vulnerability. Then, acting on an impulse fueled by desperation, Lucas lowered the device slightly. The wildness in his eyes softened just a fraction. "Dot, you think you can change this? Make the ruin stop?" "We have to try," Maya pleaded, stepping between the chaos and their severed bond. "We can build something new, together. We can uncover the truth instead of hiding in shadows." David held his breath. Would he leap in with them, or return to the safety of his empire, a ghost of what it once was? With trembling hands, he reached toward Maya, feeling her strength radiate beside him. "Together, we own this, all of it." His voice was a whisper that spun through the tension, curling around the urgency of the moment. Lucas looked torn, but steadfast. He had the shattered remnants of love and loyalty behind him. Would he step back into the light with them? Would he confront the truth, however ugly? "David, Maya, Lucas began, the light in his hands flickering. But before he could finish, the intricate web of chaos erupted again. In that moment of indecision, an officer burst through the doors, the sight instantly electrifying the room. "Put down the weapon, now!" Commanding, unyielding. The crowd erupted into desperate movement again. Maya grabbed David's arm. "We can't wait! We have to leave! Both of us!" With urgency, they inched backward while glancing at Lucas, his fate still woven into theirs. The officer's presence raised the stakes, driving a sharp wedge of fear into the air. The scrambling bodies, the shouts, the panic. It all required a unified, decisive action. "Take my hand! We can do this!" Maya shouted, firmly, resolutely, dragging David toward the back exit. David glanced back. Lucas stood there, caught between the ashes of loyalty and the blaze of newfound purpose. And in that fleeting second, something in him seemed to shift. The spotlight of truth broke through the chaos. Can he drop the barriers of violence and embrace collective reform? Punta! But David had to move. They dashed through the crowd, hearts pounding like drums in their chests, fueled by adrenaline and longing for connection. The night held its breaths, life teetering on uncertainty. Would they all find a way to rise from this together? As they burst through the doors into the cool night air, the echoes of their choices lingered behind them. But their futures danced ahead, a ferocious, uncharted path. Awareness flickered like stars scattered across the horizon, insights waiting to be unraveled. And just as they stepped into the unknown, David turned his head for one last glimpse of a chaotic night. Realization dawning like the breaking dawn. Freeing oneself from the shackles of the past wasn't a simple task. But there was potential, always potential. In the distance, sirens shrieked, but a flicker of hope ignited within him. Family, love, and truth needed now more than ever. Would they find their way back? Or would the echoes of their past forever haunt them? The night had transformed, but the journey was far from over. This is where the story ends for now, but you don't want to miss what comes next. Subscribe immediately so you don't miss the upcoming exclusive stories. This is the moment to show your support. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. And don't hesitate to flood the comment section with your reactions and theories about this ending. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see what happens next. Don't wait even a second longer to share. True fans don't hold back. Join the journey today.